Oh, day. God damn. I feel like the son of Sam. The lights are blinking. I'm thinking it's all over when I go out drinking. Oh, making my mind slow. That's why I don't fuck with the big 4-0. So we made it to day number 51. We didn't do a second editing stream. Yesterday, I played video games all day and ate Vietnamese food. So I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. It was fucking amazing. Yeah. So we got that coronavirus all up in your areas, um, with a death toll that is various depending on whether you're talking to the Chinese or us. But yeah, I'm seeing videos of crowded hospitals and shit like that. So yeah, it's time to start stacking up on some canned goods, stocking up. Better get some more NAD delivered in a hurry. Yeah, man, it feels like it's starting to do something. I don't know what. Maybe I'll start growing tits or something. But I'm a fan. Oh, yeah, just like in the middle of the night while I was trying to get to sleep, I had like all this weird energy last night. It was strange. And I'm seeing my girl tomorrow, so it's not like I could channel it into something productive at the time. But I digress. Mm. So hello to everybody out there in Chatland. It's Friday morning. Hopefully you got something cool planned for the weekend. I think I'm gonna hang out with my girl tomorrow, which means I got to clean up my house. But it's good. It's good. It's been too long since I've like cleaned the place up. I'm gonna feel way better after I do it. And but we're still gonna edit tomorrow morning. Just usually after a show night, the editing is kind of like we just rehash something that we've already done. But it's pretty early in the morning right now, and we got a bunch of time. So I would love it if we could get a solid block of work done on this guy here. Hopefully, we won't have too much distraction from like fucking Nazi trolls and whatnot there. Because God, I can't help but be baited by those people. It's so fun blogging at them. All right, what do we got here? We changed the size of our. We're using a different. What do we got here? There we go. Yeah, we're using a different capture card on this guy, and there's a little bit lag. So that's just like a cut. So sometimes if I cut a piece out, but I still like it, I'll throw it in a comment. But I'm not going to go into that. So at the moment, in the last day, shit has gotten kind of like radical with Freya, her love interest Dan. She's realized that he is still into her, but shit has been getting increasingly weirder. Now there is like an official investigation into Freya's mother, Lassa, on account of she has been apparently stealing data from her workplace or putting through a bunch of tests that don't make any fucking sense. Yeah, so let's get into it a little bit here. Hold on, let me angle this way over here so you can get my dark side. Only that it were that easy. What do we have here? I'm fucking sleepy for some reason. I don't know. I went to bed at fucking like 10 o'clock. Woke up at, well, that's why. I woke up at 4 a.m. But let's get into it because I do feel focused for editing today. The road to Bangor was long and winding, and their conversation slowly drifted into an unkind silence. And the road to Bangor was loaded. Loaded. Yeah, I gotta stop doing that into the mic. Sorry about that. Fucking early AM and sinuses and shit like that it drives me crazy. The road to Bangor was long and winding, and their conversation had drifted into an unkind silence. Each of them was trying to make sense of what had happened, their thoughts twisted away in too many directions at once. Each of them was trying to make sense of what had happened, but their thoughts were gnarled, twisting away in too many directions at once. Freya kept trying to think of something to say, but the darkness had settled around them too thickly. 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Oh, shout outs to Rogue Editor right there. Welcome to the stream once again. Mm. Freya kept trying to think of something to say, but the darkness had settled around them too thickly. The roads were empty. 10 minutes might pass before they saw headlights coming their way. No one was behind them. She thought of asking Dan to turn on the radio, but they were so far out that it might only be static. The radio might not even work. She'd never seen Dan turn it on. Maybe he just preferred silence. Uh-huh. So that's a whole thought paragraph. Or am I using a de-esser or a noise gate? Audio sounds a little different. No, it's just my voice is low at the moment, just because I just woke up and I'm like kind of congested. So yeah, it's me talking at a lower volume than normal. But as far as I can see, the signal channel is the same. Let's see. We're on channel 4, which is the right channel, and we're hitting. Yeah, this is about as loud as I want channel 4 to be. So it sounds about the same to me. But yeah, that's just, mucus in my sinus cavity that's making it sound different. Gotta be my guess. Hold on. We should really do a check real quick so I don't do an entire fucking stream that's messed up. 1 second. Okay. So, let me see here. So how did that work out for us right there? Check, 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 check. Yeah. All right. So I turned it up a little bit because I was talking quietly, and I think that's about the sum of it. This sounds fucking regular to me, but it could also be that no, I would hear it if the Air Tools was fucking up. So I think we're all right. Maybe he preferred silence. It seemed like anything she could say was the wrong thing, so she said nothing. Who were they to each other? Who were they to themselves? Freya was lost in thought, feeling so much more alone. Feeling more alone for the closeness she'd lost. And I'm feeling more alone than I ever did before. Shout out to Ben Full. I would actually go see that motherfucker in concert. I bet it's a good show. It better not be coronavirus. I don't want to die in the first wave. At least let me make it to where I become like a warlord in the plague scourged aftermath and die from hubris. That's like a much better character arc for me, IMO. When the city lights appeared on the horizon, she felt a sense they were being delivered from the darkness. There were street lamps now, and when she searched Dan's face for answers, there were street lamps now, and she searched Dan's face for answers as the car slipped through pools of pale light. You okay? She asked. Yeah. Just feels heavy, you know? I don't want this to stop, but I'm afraid of where it's going. I feel like I'm caught in the tide. Oh, son of a bitch. Hold on just a second. I think I can stop that. Fucking Microsoft. There we go. Okay, so we should be set on that noise bothering us there. Freya worried at Dan's choice of words. If they kept going, would she see him caught in the sea? Would he see her drowning in the river? They would both have to relive it all. If they kept sharing their memories, would she see him caught in the sea? Would he see her drowning in the Silas River? And yeah, I think just river is better there. They would both have to relive it all, to suffer everything again. She felt a sudden desire to roll down the window and hurl the star. She felt a sudden desire to roll down the window and hurl the star ball out into the woods. She waited for it to work on her, the cooling, doped-up feeling. But it never came. It knew it had her. It's like an interesting concept right there, or conceit, or whatever you want to call it. Oh, let me sidle over a little. Oh, that's the wrong fucking way, boys. There we go. So I don't want to be too all up in our chat right. I like that I can reach out and grab some of these words here. Like that because has to fucking go. So according to Agent BT0, this book is gay as shit. Well, thank you. Yeah, I was hoping that the homosexual undertones were picked up, but most people were kind of missing out on them because the primary relationship appears on the surface to be heterosexual, but I'm glad that you could pick that out. Excellent gaydar, sir. I wonder why that is. Huh. Anyhow. Hope you're joking. No, I'm 100%. The book is full, chock full of homosexual narratives. Just so many. Yeah, it really, I'm just trying to convert as many young men as I can. And it's not because I myself am gay. It's because I think that the Earth's population is too high. And only by converting a vast majority of the population to homosexuality can we continue to exist. So I'm here trying to save the world. Thanks very much. Mate, a purple shirt. I suck cock, apparently, because I'm wearing a purple shirt. Well, actually, the shirt isn't even purple. That's just an artifact of this camera. It's actually a very manly red, but I think that futzing around with camera settings just to change shit up is super gay. You know what else is super gay? Thinking about what other guys are wearing. I bet you spend a lot of time thinking about other guys. Am I right? Anyhow. Oh, I love that kind of shit, man. I could do that all day. Oh, good God Almighty. But this is like kind of like a heartfelt chapter. It's really not a great spot for internet trolls to be hanging out. I don't know how much you're going to get on it. I'm mostly going to be focusing on the book. Answer the question. I don't see a fucking question. You know, generally, when you have a question, you'll add a question mark to the end of it to indicate that it's interrogative or interrogative, especially in this text-based format where I have no fucking clue who you are or what's wrong with you. Just putting it out there. People weren't made for this, especially not the two of them. Again, the suspicion that the Starball had selected them because... ooh, that's a good... Freya wondered if the Starball had selected them because they were broken, easier to control. Oh, I love that line. It's fucking fantastic. Lasso would have never surrendered. The thought of her mother made Freya wonder where she was and if she was okay. People weren't made for this, especially not the two of them. Let's see. Okay, so the question is, why am I such a cock-sucking twat? I don't know. Some people say that it's genetic, but I fall more on the side of it's like partially a socially learned behavior and partially a sort of reproductive opportunism where it's beneficial for the social group, but not just generally beneficial for the individual right there. It's a good offshoot for, like you might think of it as a way to make use of DNA that probably shouldn't continue on, but that could be tangentially useful in the here and now. So it's kind of, it's definitely like an interesting question, you know, why do gay people exist? And evolutionary biologists have like a lot of neat explanations there. And please don't think that I'm trying to minimize people by just saying like non-viable DNA, but there are lots of people that are just not viable. It doesn't have anything to do with whether they're gay or not. Like Dark Mage, for instance, should never have children. So yeah, it's like a very interesting question there. One with like a lot of interesting answers and so forth. And in general, like I have to say, like they're fabulous, and I'm happy that they're here, even if they are potentially an evolutionary dead end. I mean, I'm not having any kids either, so I can't sling stones. But what do we got here? Let's see. I just answered the question. Just cut to the chase, fuckhead. Wow, you really just do not seem like the nicest person. I gotta tell you, if I was inviting people from the chat to a party, you probably would not get the invite. But I guess you're probably used to that at this point. Why am I personally such a cocksucking twat? I don't know. You know, like, I think I answered the question with a statement of, I don't know, who among us really knows why we are who we are? But I'm just happy that I am who I am. You know, that's as profound as I need to get early in the morning. I don't think that's very cowardly at all. I think it's like a little bit more cowardly for the person who's hiding behind a chat screen to blog whilst producing nothing of value themselves. Like, you can see my face right here. You know what I'm saying? Do you want to drop your face on the screen? Why don't you post a picture of your asshole, assuming that you're of legal age, and we'll all take a gander at it, right? And make commentary and critique. But the picture of my asshole is right here, buddy. Anyhow, if you keep blogging in the chat and don't say anything that's interesting, I'll probably mute you. I'm just putting it out there. So shape up a little bit. Let's see. The thought of her mother made Freya wonder where Lasse was and if she was okay. Fucking queer. Yeah, I like that, wouldn't I? Fucking queer. Why is this guy? I will tell you that if you're not like 14 years old, let me just share a little info. Like, one, you're probably not going to get a emotional response out of me because I've worked with like such better trolls than you, like fantastically better. But I will tell you that anybody who fixates on homosexuality like that is themselves homosexual, right? And it's very easy for people to tell the difference, right? Between, oh, I'm just trolling to try and get a rise out of you, to that guy has like some repressed issues in his life right there. And like anybody that's like upset at what another guy is wearing, like, once again, the only people who care what men are wearing are women and men who like other men. I'm just putting it out there, right? I do not give a fuck what somebody else is wearing outside of like one little super slam that I can get off or something like that. But you didn't even really have a super slam. So, I mean, if I can leave you with anything of value, it's that, you know, this repressed homosexuality will just churn in you ad nauseum, fucking forever. You will never be able to escape it until you realize your true self. And it's, you know, it's weird that you would get this advice from like a guy standing behind a science fiction novel or whatever, but I have zero doubt, right? I've known so many people over the years, all the guys that were like rapping, I hate them, doing this kind of shit right there. Every single one of them got turned out by some burly Marine or something like that. Every single one of them, without fucking fail. And then afterward, they're so fucking happy, right? Because it's like they've taken this giant burden off of themselves or let go of this giant shit that had been festering in them for their entire fucking lives. And the same thing will happen to you. And then you'll be a nice person, right? Because you won't be so, despite all your rage, you're still just a rat in a cage up in here. So I'm going to block you because I don't think you have anything of use to say. But I hope that this gift is helpful to you. And I really hope you enjoy your journey. Because honestly, like, yeah, I'm a little bit envious, right? Because I don't have some giant complex that's like burdening me down. There's not a tremendous amount of room for growth in my character arc that I know about, right? I might be wrong. Like maybe we'll have some redemption arc associated with my radio show, or maybe I'll get deeply into charity. But I think I'm about where I'm going to be for the most part, with like some minor improvements for the rest of my life. And that guy has so far to fucking go. He can get so much better than he is because he's completely worthless right now. And that's part of the curse of having value. You don't have as far to climb. So anyhow, that's a fun distraction. I like that. But yeah, we will never hear from that chatter again unless he makes a bunch of accounts. And ooh, what would I do then? They arrived. All right, there we go. So people weren't made for this, especially not the two of them. Freya wondered if the Starball had selected them because they were broken, easier to control. Lasse would have never surrendered. The thought of her mother. So I don't like. Is Radomir based on Dwayne? Oh yeah, you could definitely. Oh, we could throw that interaction on like live stream fails or some shit like that. Yeah, maybe like I could get some fucking traction that way. getting real meta here because now those people might be now viewing it at some point in the future right there. And like if I have anything, a message for those users is like, Jesus Christ, get outside. Get outside of your house ASAP, man. Y'all are some fixated motherfuckers. All right. So the question is Radomir based on Dwayne? No, Radomir is actually, would be mostly based on my experiences dealing with Polish and Slavic people who are just total fuck it, who are like kind of have this badass thing about them, right? There's a lot to respect I mean, we're talking about some like very different ethnic groups, but the Poles, you know, as much as they get some bullshit for being dumb, those are some tough motherfuckers right there. And like one of the pieces of science fiction literature that I respect the most right there is Solaris by Stanislaw Lem, or Lem. And and like it's no fucking surprise that we have the copy of Solaris. I can't remember if it's Solaris or Solaris, but I'll just go with Solaris. It's no surprise that we have that in this book because tremendous accomplishment. Really, I read that book and I almost despaired of like, I mean, it's kind of cliche, but somebody reads something and they're like, "What am I fucking doing? I'm never going to be on that level." I felt the same way reading Dune. Until I read like some of the later books in Dune, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can be at this level at least. And the Sun's books, I think I'm gonna go out there. I think I'm already a little bit better than Brian Herbert. I'm just putting it out there. If you want to fucking fight me, Brian Herbert, you can do it. But I don't think your stuff is very good, and I never have. Anyhow. Freya wondered if the Starball had selected them because they were broken, easier to control. Lassa would have never... Oh, yeah. I don't like the... Much better, the Kang. Oh, thank you so much, Bob. You're fucking, really warms my heart to hear that. The thought of her mother reminded Freya she didn't know where Lassa was, or if she was okay. Freya had been so wound up in herself she'd barely spared a thought for anyone else. Radomir was still in the hospital. Jane had sent her an apology 6 texts long, and she had just ignored it. So as a reader, I question, do people want to see that like 6 text long apology? Which is kind of, we just kind of like leave that out. I wonder if it would be interesting to the reader or fun to write or something like that. But yeah, I don't think I can write 6 texts in the voice of Jane Yang just at this moment. Everyone she knew had gotten hurt. Everything she touched got stained. They arrived at the venue and Dan took her hand again. "This is all my fault," she whispered. "I should have told someone right away. Now it's too late." Dan's eyes were locked on hers. His mouth moved as he searched for the right thing to say, and then discarded whatever he settled on. Oh, we don't need that. If we want to, tomorrow we can go to Dr. Garbuglio. If we want to, tomorrow we can go to Dr. Garbuglio together, Dan offered. She stared at him. They both knew they wouldn't do that. I mean, we have that option. If things get worse. It still felt impossible, but she didn't want to make him feel bad. Part of her knew he was right. "Okay," she said, trying to smile. "Hey, wait here," he said, and he cut the ignition and walked around the car to open the door for her. When she took his hand and stepped out of the car, he kissed her, and she buried her face against his neck. "Thank you," she whispered in his ear. Hand in hand, they walked into the venue. So I think the name of this restaurant, wait, hold on. How to form concrete statues. Google. I actually know a fair bit about making concrete molds for statues there. I think generally you would do it with 2-part sand molds and then adhere them together for the most part. Just because concrete is so fucking heavy. Yeah, I know a little bit more about bronze than concrete. But what are you going to make a statue of? It's just 12-foot tall concrete pecker, right in the front of your lawn. Massive boulders for balls. I see. So now, who's latently homosexual? Just putting it out there. um, what's the name for an entrance hall? Name for an entrance hall in the grand foyer. In the lobby. Lobby is the word that I want. I don't know why I couldn't. Everyone was looking at Freya and Dan. They were the youngest people in the lobby by decades. Uh, There was something peculiar about the concrete statue in the lobby. It seemed to represent male genitals. Very peculiar. Wait, hold on just a second. Let me see if this guy. Working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. Hell yeah. All right, cool. Got rid of that motherfucker. That's what I like. Mm-hmm. Everyone was looking at Freya and Dan. They were the youngest people in the lobby by decades, and that was a good thing. Freya was much more comfortable in this crowd than she would have been with kids her own age. Freya was much more comfortable in this crowd than she would have been with people her own age. Freya was much more comfortable in this crowd. Oh, that's better. Yeah, we don't need the like the reader is able to make the age distinction in their heads. People smiled when they caught Freya's eye. Everyone was dressed up and here to have a good time. For the 100th time, she checked the inside pocket of her jacket. The pale blue tickets were there, beside the star ball. So interesting point here, because she's wearing an evening gown. There are no pockets for the star ball. It has to be in her coat. Ooh, which means we have to go back, right? We have to go back through this entire fucking chapter because I bet there's something about her feeling the star ball on her hip because we do that like every fucking scene. That sucks that we have to go through the whole chapter, but we can do it kind of. Okay, cool. Okay, so here, yeah, just I think we might just need the jacket pocket thing. Okay, and then it's in her hand. Da, 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 da. Okay, cool. So we don't get deeper into it there. We just need to specify that it's in her jacket pocket because there are it's like a tiny little note, right? Teeny tiny little note that maybe nobody would ever even notice, but that's what editing is all about. Just like thinking of like, hey, this thing is wrong. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Just nestled against the star ball. With the star ball. Oh God. So hold on, I just want to display. When night shift is off, we don't want night shift on. And then energy saver. Where is the auto display brightness? Because I think it's just that this display is failing. It's under color. I'm not sure that the season, I think it's just like the display is slowly failing. Well, this guy has been going like really strong for like 50 days. It hasn't rebooted in the whole time. So if it bites it, it deserves to die. Let's get back to it. For the 100th time, she checked the inside pocket of her jacket. The pale blue tickets were there, with the star ball. The ticket taker asked for ID. Yes, Freya. The ticket taker had a burgundy fez with a golden tassel and a matching vest. He asked Freya for ID and shook his head when she tried to explain she was a guest at the opening act. He apologized and said he absolutely couldn't let anyone in under 18 in. He apologized and said he absolutely couldn't admit anyone under 18. Freya blinked in astonishment. Out of all the ways she'd imagined this going wrong, she hadn't expected to be stopped for being underage. An old man in a pinstripe suit on the guidelines groaned, "Come on now," in protest, and a murmur ruffled through the cluster of people. "Get the manager, please." The words were said politely, but it was a demand. Freya had to fight to keep Lass out of her voice. There was a sense it was all going off the rails after they'd come so far. The manager appeared. He was a tall black man with dark raised freckles on his cheeks. Shout outs to Morgan Freeman. I actually looked that up a little bit. The way that some, and generally I want to say that they're relatively light-skinned black people, will get kind of like those raised freckly dots on their skin. Is like a weird condition, and I think it has something to do with all the way that people of African descent also have like a increased frequency of keloid type scars and everything. It's just like a weird skin thing, but I've always thought that those were attractive. To tell you, but I like freckles in general. When summertime comes around, I'll have some myself. So I'm just getting it out there. I think freckles are the truth. I got a bunch of them on my arms right now. God damn. I'm just like tiny cancers. The manager appeared. He was a tall black man. He was irate walking over, but he smiled when he approached them and asked how he could help. Stop getting horny about freckles. I don't think I'm horny at the moment, honestly. You would know. There was something familiar about him to Freya. Mm. So Soul ZYY Live says, "Put me in UR book goof." So I will tell you that people who have been here for many of these shows, who have contributed meaningfully to the book, will be thanked in a special acknowledgments page that has all their chat links and everything. So I will actually put those people who are useful and valuable people into the book. So if you want to get there, you got to work. I know, yeah. Well, it's not really cool. Like I really owe people like Stratum and Spathiwa like a depth of gratitude that far exceeds just mere mention in a book. I'll try to think about something like that. I was just trolling to start, but I actually like you, man. Oh, yeah, I actually have a shit ton of listeners to my other radio program that are just people who are like initially trying to troll me and found it somewhat impossible. Just please believe that I've been doing this for so fucking long at this point. So I'm obviously in there already, right? Bob, we're gonna add you in there just because I like you. I have not seen a lot of good edits from you. So the ticket taker held up the line and called out, The manager was summoned. He was a tall black man with raised freckles on his cheeks. He was irate walking over, but he smiled when he approached them and asked how he could help. He looked familiar to Freya. She was trying to figure out where she'd seen him before. We're guests of Mr. Mathis. He gave me these tickets. I'm his student. Freya produced the tickets. At once, the manager's mouth became a flat line of discontent, and Freya was afraid she'd screwed up. But the manager swiveled to the ticket taker and tapped a long, callous finger on the ticket where it said comp at the top. And tapped a long, callous finger. Well, there's a lot of things with like long fingers in this section of GRAVID. You got death at the window. I know there was another mention of them somewhere else. Tapped a long, callous finger onto the ticket where it said comp at the top. He tilted his head forward at the younger man, who winced. I like that he has a Thez now. He's new. My apologies, miss. Please come right in. It's no trouble. Thank you both, Freya said, nodding to the ticket taker diplomatically. She didn't want to give a worker a hard time in front of Dan again. The old man in the pinstripe suit was smiling at them. He said, All right now. All right now, and Freya smiled back. The manager insisted on showing them to their table. As he led them in, he introduced himself as Riley Gardner, and when she heard his name, she finally remembered where she'd seen him. Okay, the manager insisted on showing them to their table. As he led them into the ballroom, he introduced himself as Riley Gardner. She remembered where she'd seen him before. You play bass with Moon's Blues Band, right? She asked, and he grinned, and he lit up. Let me see. So I think it's a little cliche to say she lit up like she'd hit the slot machine jackpot or some shit like that. I do. Where did you see us? Lobster Fest 2 years ago. I remember you opened with a cover of The Killing Moon. I love that song. He leaned back and shook his head in surprise. He gave Dan a look. Watch out for this one. She's sharp as a knife. Anyone who can remember a bass player is dangerous. It was a good set, Freya said a bit lamely. She was afraid she seemed like a freak for remembering something so small. She was afraid she seemed like a freak for remembering a minor detail. Right away, Riley saw he'd pushed a touch too far, and he held up both hands, drawing their attention back to himself. Okay, the world's most famous blues bassist and the world's most famous jazz bassist meet for dinner. Who picks up the tab? Freya and Dan shrugged. Neither. They don't charge at the soup kitchen, Riley grinned. Dan snorted and Freya covered her mouth and said, "Oh God." It was a deft way to disarm them. As he led them into the hall, Riley chatted easily with Freya about her lessons with Mr. Mathis. So I think he's already led them into the hall there. As he led them through a forest of circular tables, Riley chatted easily with Freya about her lessons with Mr. Mathis. She told him how long she'd been playing and what she could play. She told him how long she'd been studying and what she could play. As soon as they arrived at their spot, someone called out for him across the hall, and he held up a hand in greeting. Excusing himself, Riley shook both of their hands and wished them an enchanted evening. That was so cool of him. I was so sure we were about to get... I thought we were about to get tossed out. I thought we were about to get tossed out. We're VIPs. Freya grinned, though she'd thought the same thing. We're VIPs, Freya smiled, though she'd thought the same thing. So, interesting note there. I'm not sure if you can use smiled as a verb that way, because I'm using it like, and so the difference would be like a period. If the smile is the verb, then you need a period there. But if you're using smiled in place of said, then you do not need a period. And I think that you can do it. I think we've used that a couple other spaces in the word. That's something I need like an actual editor to tell me this is acceptable or this is not acceptable. Because Lord, I don't know. There's just like so much stuff, right, involved in writing where you really need the benefit of like 20 or 30 years of hard experience, and there is no fucking substitute for it. Somebody who just really has a deep feel for what's right and what's wrong in English, focusing on that very microscopic level of, and that's more like a proofreader task also, but like I would expect my line editor to catch that also. I don't know, maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. Let me know if it stands out, but I think we can get away with it. Dan pulled out her chair for her, and she took off her coat. Suddenly, he looked like he'd been hit in the back of the head. He'd never seen her in a dress before. Freya felt color coming to her cheeks. She suppressed an urge to hide her face in her hands. Okay. Dan pulled out her chair for her, and she took off her coat. Suddenly, he looked like he'd been hit in the back of the head. He'd never seen her in a dress before. Freya felt color coming to her cheeks. She suppressed an urge to hide her face in her hands. Wow, he breathed, and she smiled back at him, feeling warmth that was more than just the room filling up. Just as Mr. Mathis had promised, there were amazing seats. The table was right beside the stage, with a vase of white flowers and a votive burning in a cobalt blue glass. It felt more like a gala than a concert. The hall was filled with closely packed tables. Waiters were swarming around, bringing trays of cocktails. Swallow Hall had vaulted ceilings with intricate plaster that had been painted gold once, long ago. Everything had a slightly decrepit feel to it. The burgundy curtains on the stage were frayed. Hold on, let's go back. Boom. We're making the fez maroon because the guy himself is a maroon. Oh, also, I don't want his fucking fez. to match the drapes. Is that like a like weird joke about pubic hair? What the fuck? The burgundy curtains on the stage were frayed at the hems. The crystal chandeliers were missing beads, and the wood floors had been worn by countless dancing feet. Uh, and the shine had been worn off the wood floors by countless dancing feet. But no one seemed to care. Everyone was excited, talking loudly, laughing for everyone to hear. Freya could hear the band tuning up behind the curtain. Somewhere back there, Mr. Mathis was probably at work with the Korg chromatic tuner. After a bit, a stagehand walked out to the center of the stage with a microphone trailing a coil of XLR cable behind him. He held his palm flat and adjusted the microphone so its base was at the top of its head. That's a Unidyne 55, Freya remarked at the microphone, and Dan nodded, though he probably had no idea what she was talking about. The waiters came around, taking final orders before the set and blowing out all the little candles. The buzz of anticipation grew until the lights dimmed. With a spotlight following him, Riley Gartner strolled onto the stage, all smiles for the sold-out show. He spent a few minutes nodding and pointing to people in the crowd, and then he turned to the microphone. He was exactly level with his mouth. He spent a while smiling hello and pointing in recognition to people in the crowd, like, hey! Then he turned to the microphone. He was exactly level with his mouth. I like that little maneuver where the stagehand sets the microphone, he does that number there, and it's exactly level with his boss's mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Swallow Hall. Riley waited expertly for the applause to die down. It is my utmost pleasure to introduce my good friend, the most marvelous, most magnificent, most miraculous, Mr. Ezekiel Mathis. The applause grew ever louder. There was a wonderful energy in the room. Riley Gardner strolled off the stage, and a moment later the stagehand rushed in the opposite direction and spirited the microphone away. They could hear the click above them as the spotlight was killed. The burgundy curtains parted, and the stage was bathed in blue light from above. It sparkled on the chrome of the drum kit and the golden frets of Mr. Mathis's New Yorker. Beside it, Freya recognized his all-black Stratocaster. All the instrument. Oh, I wish Stratum was here. Goes this kind of like musical instrument shit is kind of right up his alley. He could be fact checking all this. Hold on just a second. Bam. Guy's gone. All right, hold on. All the instruments were laid out in readiness on the stage. One by one, the musicians marched out to take their places while everyone applauded. Butter Bill Sampson was on drums. Leopold Harris was on bass. Freya hadn't heard the backup guitarist, Reginald Daly, before, but there was a web finner. Freya hadn't heard the backup guitarist, Reginald Daly, before, but there was a Weber Fern mandolin on a stand next to his silver jazz master, and she was dying to know what they were going to play on it. That's a Freya hadn't heard the backup guitarist, Reginald Daly, before. Freya hadn't heard him play before. There was a Weber Fern mandolin on a stand next to his silver jazz master, and she was dying to know what they were going to play on it. Mr. Mathis walked out last, slower than the others as he took his place. The spotlight went up on him, and she could see him peering out at the audience, that same stern look on his face, like he'd seen this. That familiar stern look on his face, like he'd seen this all 10,000 times before. There was a pain in his eyes. Freya knew his arthritis had to be bothering him. Every set of eyes. There was a pain in his stride. Freya knew his arthritis had to be bothering him. Every set of eyes in the room was locked on him. Every detail of his face stood out in the brilliant light. "Jolene," he said, and that was all. He picked up his guitar. Mr. Mathis picked up his guitar, and the band shifted into readiness and began to play the song. They let the music do the talking for them, and if he was suffering, she couldn't hear it. Not a note was out of place. Freya had never heard him sing in person before, and his voice was surprising to her. There was something ragged and haunting. There we go. That's a new paragraph. There was something ragged and haunting about it live that wasn't there on his albums. The audience was rapt until he finished, and then there was an explosion of applause. Just like that, with his very first song, he had them. After that, the band played R.L. Burnside. All right. Next, Mr. Mathis played R.L. Burnside's "It's Bad, You Know," stepping on an effects pedal as he played the harmonica parts so his lines were rolling with echo. Then they played "Goodbye Pork Pie Hat," one of Freya's favorites. That's also probably my favorite jazz song of all time. Yeah, if you're ever if you're ever playing in a fucking band and I'm there, I'll always try to request it from like a jazz trio or whatever. It's a standard, so usually people know it. Oh, just a gorgeous fucking song. I forget exactly what my favorite version of it is. I think it's Mahavishnu or something like that. But it's a gorgeous song. As he played, as Mr. Mathis played, she saw his eyes narrowing from time to time with hurt. The next song was "Stormy Monday," and he let Reginald handle almost all the guitar work as he sang. Freya wondered if his song list was set up so that way to give him time to rest his hands. Freya wondered if Mr. Mathis' song list was set up that way to give him time to rest his hands. His singing style was exactly what she would have expected. His range was small, but he never went for a note he couldn't hit. Freya kept checking on Dan, afraid he might be bored, but whenever she glanced over at him, his eyes were on the stage, bright and shining. She saw Mr. Mathis set down the New Yorker and pick up his Stratocaster. When he took the slide out of his pocket, she knew what was coming next. She watched Dan's mouth become an O of surprise when he began to play Turn the Page. Dan mouthed Metallica at her, and she smiled at him. It was originally a Bob Seger song, but Mathis played it much more like the cover. He kicked up the reverb and played the saxophone part with his slide. As he played, Freya thought of all the stickers on his battered guitar kit. Okay, so I'm feeling like we may have gone like too long with this concert thing, but whatever. It's important to her. Wait, hold on. Lol. That's wild. What do we got there? All right, what do we got? As Mr. Mathis played, Freya thought of all the stickers on his battered guitar case, the long stare as he'd faced out at the crowd. The whole time he seemed like he was just a few steps ahead of the song, and afterward he drained half the bottle of water and introduced his band. She was surprised. They didn't do the nearly ubiquitous mini-solo as they were introduced. Each man only tilted up his head or raised a hand. They'd made a conscious choice to strip out all the theatrics from their set. All the while, Freya was waiting for some sign he'd seen her, a little nod or a glance, but he was wholly... All the while, Freya was waiting for some sign her teacher had seen her, a little nod or a glance, but he was wholly focused on playing. He played two of his own songs, The Desolator, which began bright and jangling but shifted abruptly to a minor key midway through the song, and at the end the bass line was a 1-2 heartbeat that slowly petered out. The applause that followed was somber and hollow-sounding. Then he reeled them back in with Maltz Waltz, an up-tempo march with a swinging, inebriated rhythm that had toes tapping all over the hall. Since the band had taken the stage, Freya had been eyeing the mandolins standing beside the backup guitarist, and it came out for the next song. The stagehand brought a pair of chairs, and Mr. Mathis and Reginald sat down facing each other and began to play the Battle of Evermore. Freya clapped her hands together softly with delight as soon as she heard the first bar. Reginald sang the Sandy Denny parts in a soft and serviceable tenor, but the mandolin was the real star. Freya was entranced. She wanted to buy one the moment the song was over. Afterward, Mr. Mathis and Reginald stood back up and the stagehand took the chairs away. Mr. Mathis straightened his tie, stiffened his posture, and swept his eyes across the crowd, lingering on them for a second. His gaze lingered for a second on Freya, and he winked at her. She smiled so hard her cheeks hurt. "All right, y'all. You ready to get down to business?" he asked, and a few people in the crowd began to applaud. There was a sense of anticipation in the air from people who had seen his act before. They began to play Waiting for the Miracle by Leonard Cohen. It was like the first part of the show was just a warm-up. There was an intensity among the band as if they were in an operating room. Beads of sweat were forming on their temples. Their faces were drawn with focus. As they played, something was happening to Mr. Mathis. His hands were dancing on the frets. The pain was gone from his face. It was like a weight had lifted off of him, and the music was flowing into the room. This was the moment he told her all their practice was for, but now it was shared with the entire hall. The feeling was so uncanny she reached into her coat pocket, but the starball was cool. It was just the music. They rolled the end of the song into a medley with Jesus Gonna Be Here by Tom Waits that disintegrated into Dark Was the Night, and then into one of Mr. Mathis's own songs, Eraser. So that's the shout out to Eraser contained within this thing. They finished with Gary Moore's Parisian Walkways. Mr. Mathis turned the melancholy ballad into something ominous and inescapable. As the last notes drowned in reverb, he stared out at the hall. Every eye was on him. It was almost totally silent. Freya could feel the hair on her arms standing up. There was something raw and demanding in his stare. No one dared blink. When he bowed, a shudder of relief passed through the crowd. They were released. There was no thought to rise. Somehow she found herself on her feet with Dan and everyone else in the crowd. As the hall erupted with applause, she clapped until her hands stung. Mr. Mathis held his hands out to each of the members of the band, and there was a new roar for each. They all took a final bow, and the curtains closed to prepare for the main act. Freya glanced around the audience. In face after face, she saw a blinking uncertainty. They were all wondering what had just happened to them. The conversations began rapidly. Everyone seemed to want to compare notes at once. She turned to Dan, who was looking to her for some kind of explanation, but she couldn't even begin. Wow. Is the other guy supposed to follow that? Dan asked, and Freya could only shake her head. Who? Oh, did we get fucking G-lined from FNet? For Christ's sake. Oh, we migrated your account to a newer IRC Cloud server as part of our routine maintenance. Hey, this is like the third time this fucking month, man. Ridiculous. So annoying. Now we'll see what becomes of it right there. Fucking IRC Cloud. People are just garbo. At least I really only have like the one channel where I have auto hop in that matters, so that's not too bad. All right, so what's our note here? No, that has nothing to do with what's going on. Oh, weird. Oh, hold on. It's trying to connect to like a local host for some reason. Connected handshaking. So Marky BTV asks, is this your novel? Yes. Oh, hold on just a second. I gotta fix something off of the screen. I'll be back. Yeah, this is my 8th novel, by the way. Good God. Yeah, so, yeah, sorry to hop out at a critical moment there. I just had to get my nickname back on EFNet. That's how real we are right there. Yeah, so this is my 8th novel right here. If you're interested in this and other shit that I've got going on, you can visit www.zachzyz.com. We have been editing this for 51 days straight. It's 6 a.m. in the morning, and we're at like page 488, 500. So it was indeed a tough act to follow. Joe Bonamassa even joked about it when he took the stage and called for another round of applause for the opening act. Joe was a skilled showman. Joe was a skilled showman. He had a good sense of the crowd. Perhaps sensing the lingering disquiet in the room, he started lighthearted with King Bee Shakedown. Evil Mama was next, followed by a cover of Albert King's Breaking Up Somebody's Home. Bonamassa's playing was extraordinary. During the solo on Blues Deluxe, Freya looked around the audience and she could pick out all the guitar players. They all had the same heavy look in their eyes. Each was thinking they could never do that, not if they practiced every day for the rest of their lives. Not if they practiced 8 hours a day for the rest of their lives. But for all of his virtuosity, there was no miracle. The music never reached her the way Mr. Mathis has. By the time the encore concluded with an overblown rendition of I'd Rather Go Blind, Freya was a little relieved it was all over. Dan's eyes were sliding onto her more and more. She was tempted to try and sneak out with him, but she felt obligated to stick around and see it through. As the room was clearing out, Riley Gardner made his way over and invited them backstage, and of course she was thrilled to accept. She was thrilled to accept. Freya expected backstage to be cramped like the theater at Grayson, but Sparrow Hall had actual dressing rooms, and there was a loading dock where techs were already breaking down Joe Bonamassa's stuff. Even without his full band, there were still mountains of equipment. "Look who I got here," Riley announced, and they found Mr. Mathis and his band holed up in a smoky dressing room. Leopold's voice was rising into a high laugh about something. Bill and Leopold's wives, Jill and Sarah, were sitting together on the makeup counter. Everyone seemed happy to see Freya. Mr. Mathis was sunken into an armchair, but before Freya could tell him not to get up, he was on his feet, walking over to greet them with his jaw clenched against the egg. "Freya, this is Reggie. Reggie, this is my student Freya. She's going to be something special. Rest of y'all are already acquainted. Who's your friend? What's he play?" "Just the fool. Hey, I'm Dan." He shook hands with everyone with a friendly grin, not knowing he'd faded from their interest the moment they found out he wasn't a musician. "Your set was incredible," Freya gushed, and Dan enthusiastically agreed. The musicians all nodded, pretending it was nothing, but there was a hint of pride in the air. They all knew different. "Well, we don't have no tractor full of amplifiers, but we do what we can," Mr. Mathis said, with a wry nod at the elaborate deconstruction taking place outside. "Hell of a player, though. I've never seen better." Freya found herself sharing that solemn nod with the rest of the musicians. There was no denying that skill, the bit of envy they all felt. Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. Oh shit, is there a tyrant reigning over LRH? Everyone chatted for a while. Riley had everyone... Oh, I think his name should be changed. Because there's Riley Halstead earlier in the... Yeah. Let's note on it. Let's not do it now. Because I definitely didn't intend for there to be two different Rileys. Maybe we'll call him Smokey. That's a little racist, really and truly. Everyone chatted for a while. Riley had everyone laughing as he... Oh, so I think we're going to change the earlier instances of Riley. We're going to give her like a more female name than Riley. And we'll leave this guy as Riley. Riley had everyone laughing as he told them how Freya had refused to be hucked out, grossly exaggerating the exchange. Dan wanted to know whose idea it was to play Battle of Evermore, and Sarah Harris told him it was her favorite song, and she insisted when she found a Madeline. Freya was bursting with questions for Reggie. He was eager to tell her what he thought about several luthiers. Mr. Mathis had a stern look. He didn't need to say it for her to hear the words. Don't get ahead of yourself. She nodded in acceptance, and she saw his eyes slide to the bouquet of flowers she'd sent. She expected him to tell her she shouldn't have, but instead he thanked her, seeming touched. All the stiffness, the tension that usually kept him upright was gone. Everyone else was talking, but he seemed slightly removed from it all. Freya wondered if he'd had a few drinks after his set. Everyone in the room seemed pretty loose. It felt like the right time to go, and she thanked everyone for an amazing show. You get her home safe now, Mr. Mathis instructed Dan seriously, setting a hand on his shoulder. Dan had a solemn look like he'd been given a quest. I like that. Mr. Mathis turned to Freya to say something to her, but she hugged him impulsively. He looked a little off guard, but the rest of the room was all smiles, and Bill and Reginald Wives cooed awes of delight. It was a good note to part on. As they made their way out of the building, Freya was struck that there was no smell of liquor on Mr. Mathis. He wasn't drunk. Everything was spent on stage. The man they saw now was just a drifting ghost. Ooh, love that. He'd spent everything on the stage. The man they saw now was just a drifting ghost. They were quiet as they made their way out to Dan's car, and all the nervousness she'd been putting off until the end of the night was there waiting for her in the parking lot. Freya was suddenly aware that everything tonight had been about her. It wasn't the kind of music Dan listened to. She barely paid attention to him. She was almost wholly focused on the show. He'd been mostly quiet in the dressing room. He'd been mostly quiet in the dressing room, too. Had he been bored this whole time? Did he feel neglected? She was searching his face for some sign, and he had his own worries. He crossed his fingers as he turned the ignition, and it didn't catch. He frowned, took a deep breath, and then it caught on the second try. Whew, he exhaled. Grinning with relief, he turned to her. That was so cool. Thank you for inviting me, Dan said. And then he hesitated, seeing something in her face. Are you okay? She nodded, willing it to be true. She tried to say something, but she was overtaken by a huge yawn. When her eyes opened, Dan had a gentle smile for her. His hand patted her shoulder. She smiled back, hoping they didn't need words. He took the wheel and began to drive her home. The stars were hidden by a veil of clouds, and the moon had yet to rise. The world was a crescent of high beams, reaching out into the darkness before them. just a crescent of the Toyota's high beams, reaching out into the dark forest before them. Freya fought to remain awake. But she was losing the fight against the insistent heat from the vents and the lulling rumble of the engine. She tried to prepare herself to imagine what she wanted to do and say when they got home. Instead, she found herself remembering the look in Mr. Mathis' eyes as he glared out at the audience. How many crowds had he looked at like that? How many faces had he searched, looking for something he would never find? She was trying to reconcile the grand and terrible look of the giant dripping with sweat in the spotlight and the hollow shell that remained in the living room. Was that what she wanted? Would she ever be strong enough to make that pact with an audience, night after night? She's going to be something special, Mr. Mathis had said, and he'd smiled, and she smiled, thinking it was an offhand compliment. But now she saw it was a geas. There was a price to be something special. The words hummed in her as the car slid through the night. She looked at Dan's face outlined in the faint light from the dashboard and shut her eyes. Ooh-wee. That's a wild chapter right there. So yeah, we didn't do a ton of editing on this, and it's like quite a long chapter. So Walking Dead creator appears to reveal origin of zombie virus. Kirkman is to believe the pathogen originated as a spaceborne spore. Oh, that's worth interesting. Stratum, can you opt me in pound stress and pound LRH and in Money Tree? Thank you. I can't believe you missed this chapter, homie. It was all about music and like guitars and you would have loved it. All right, so was that really chapter 65? Yeah, it was actually chapter 65. So how many pages did we get done here? I still can't get over whatever it is, I won't leave. And then Spaethiwa says they always tell you they won't leave, then they leave when you tell them your secret. Ooh. It's deep. All right, so that was chapter 65. So we're getting into chapter 66 is the next one right here. So I think definitely an editor could trim some of that because it's just like a lot of description of the set. But at the same time, it's something that is very, very important to Freya. I think it has some interesting things to say about... Okay, yeah, we chapter 640, so thank God, no. And I think we get into another dream sequence here. So chapter 492, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh. We can get to chapter 500 if we want to edit this chapter. And I know it's a hard one too. What the fuck we gonna do now? Oh, thank you for the ops there, Big Stratum. You're a real one. Well, it's pretty early in the morning yet. Yeah, it's 6:28. Like my voice is feeling a little rough. But I'd like to get to fucking page 500. I hope you guys feel the same. Let's fucking try and do it. We're gonna try for that next 8 pages. Hopefully this chapter isn't too hinky. I think there's fucking in it. Look, Freya, shooting stars. She was astride 2 worlds. For a moment, there was a sense that she could step backward and return to the way things had been. She was astride 2 worlds. For a moment, there was a sense she could step backward and return to the way things had been, discarding all that had followed. But she tarried too long at the limit and lost her chance. The hand that gently shook her awake was not Randall's. Randall was gone. The wrong world shifted into focus as she blinked. The overhead light was on Dan, and he was smiling at her in the amber light. There was no unity. He mistook her bitter disappointment for her grumpiness. The Toyota was idling in front of Freya's house. Lass's car was still gone. Why now? Why couldn't it ever stop? She'd been looking forward to this for so long, and now it was time, and she was clutching an open wound in the passenger's seat. It never got better. She hoped Dan wouldn't notice, but he knew her too well now. Are you okay? Dan asked. What's this comment on Dan? I had some significant flaws to the Dan character in the rewrite. I feel that we have failed to do that so far. Right? I feel like our love interest is not nuanced enough as a character. And we should make him like a more realistic personage. So definitely, as you're listening through this or whatever, know that I feel like he's too good, and that we should take some chunks out of him. And I think mostly the spots where he would be bad would be sort of like maybe like thoughtness. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to really think about it. And being bored at the show isn't a flaw. More so, normal for people who don't like the blues. Yeah, I don't think that that's a flaw. Like, he reacts like how I would expect, like a 18-year-old boy dragged to like a blues show so that he could get some trim to react. I think that's like very, very much how things would go. And where am I getting with that there? No, I just mean like we need some character flaws. Like I really should just sit down and kind of brainstorm. Like, who is this guy? What does he want? What's holding him back? And so forth. It's just, he's not, he needs like, he's like too fucking goody-goody. And we get so deep into his head too. I don't know where I'd have put that in the past few chapters. Well, no, he's like on his best behavior now because he's trying to get trim. I think he genuinely does like this character too. And I don't want his character arc to be like, oh, I got the pussy, now I'm fucking gone, see ya. Because that's like a boring trope to me right there. We'll think about it as we go on. Bad dream, Freya mumbled, not wanting to explain, even to someone who'd been through all of it. Dan reached out and held her hand, gentle and patient. There was no pressure for anything more. The dashboard clock flicked to midnight, and she began to feel better. Even without reading her mind, even without the star ball, Dan understood her. She leaned over and rested her head against his shoulder, feeling very fortunate. Thank you for coming, she whispered in his ear. You can't lean your head on somebody's shoulder and then whisper in somebody's ear. It doesn't work. Not if you're like leaning across a car. I should go. I've got work early, Dan said, and she could hear reluctance in his voice. She made a sad and senseless noise of complaint. She didn't want Dan to leave, but she was afraid to invite him in. Again, she felt that feeling of She felt the sense. She knew she would regret it whether she let him go or asked him to stay. Was she ready? Was he? All the advice everyone had given her was crashing together in her mind. She took a deep breath, trying to listen for what she felt. Do you want to come inside? Freya asked. Yes, Dan replied. There was no hesitation in his voice. Let me see. If he doesn't have reluctance in his voice, but ambivalence, maybe. Okay, so I realize now that we should pause for tomorrow here. One, I need to do some work in my home, but two, also like I think we put a fair amount into editing the past chapter, and now that I remember what's going on in this one, this is one where we're gonna need our full powers for it, and I think I'm about tapped out at the moment. So yeah, we're gonna have another show tonight if you know what the secret stream is all about, and then we'll be editing tomorrow and the next day. So I think on day 52 we're going to hit page 500. That's going to be my goal, to edit this chapter tomorrow. And maybe over the weekend, we can pick up a little bit of steam. I guess we would have to get to page 520 to get to an average of 10 pages a day, which would be cool, but I mean, not something that I want to like shove for. So let's see what's going on. So that's a spot where we could introduce some questioning of Dan. Maybe. See, the kind of the problem here is that like I have not had like a largely. So we're gonna get into. I think the next scene is like a sex scene, and that's a spot where we can have some weirdness coming through. And also I'm more talking about like character flaws, right? Maybe he's too vindictive, right? Maybe he doesn't like skew kind of high on narcissism or whatever. I think it would be good to just like sit down and kind of like brainstorm this chapter, or this guy, like, you know, what's his fucking Myers-Briggs and what does he want? What does he hate? And so forth. So we need to do a little bit of a character sheet for him. And I think also the Lassa character needs more to her than just being like this fucking lioness right there. But I feel pretty good about Freya in this edit. I think that she's like an entirely nuanced and relatable character. And I think we just need to add a few drawbacks to Dan. I think Freya has more than enough drawbacks. You get to see like all the petty shit that she doesn't, that she thinks and doesn't like. Oh yeah. Like this is the right decision 100%, because my voice is like already is not in great shape. And we do have to do a special show tonight. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, Stratum. And let's get down to it. So everybody have a good day today. Have a good Friday. And the quest will fucking continue tomorrow. We can do this. I believe.